mobile video is not a new thing here. You all know that people here have been watching video on their phones for years. They just haven't been getting that video there wirelessly. It's been through side loading and preloaded SD cards that they get video onto that phone. That's interesting to me because people have had the ability to get video on phones wirelessly in other developed countries for years, and they just didn't do it, right? But here, in countries where you're talking about on average smaller screens, you're talking about obviously lower bandwidth. People have been going to great lengths to actually watch video on phones. So you have to take note of that. There's an appetite there. What other things do these methods have in common? Well, yes, they're cumbersome. You can imagine being on the train and realizing, hey, I've seen this SD card before, don't have another one. Again, the content that's on these, that people are loading on these phones is largely pirated content. It's cheap. This has been a big learning for me here. It's not just about the quality content that's made available, it's also the price point. So we'll talk more about that in a second. But, they're all off. These are all offline methods of getting content onto a phone. So I won't belabor the top 4 data points that are there. I mean, we've talked a lot about them. Whether that 600 million number is SIMs or subscriber, I guess there's a lot of debate on that. I think that personally it's 600 million SIMs, maybe about 300 million subscribers, considering the prepaid SKU, and the number of people that I meet every day that have 6 or 7 SIM cards. But certainly there is an expectation that number is going to get to 1 billion subscribers by 2014, and I do believe that is possible. We talked about the downlink and uplink spectrum of 3G, so I won't belabor that as well, and that's 5 megahertz, and the point there is that, yes, it's not a lot, and it probably is going to be used, based on what I've heard, to provision some of the voice issues that exist. And of course, ARPU, $2, 98 rupees. I guess if you actually break the 600 million into actual subscribers, you could say that $2 is actually about 4. But it's low. It's one of the lowest in the world. And yes, it's remarkable that Indian businesses make money at that number, and that's something we should applaud. Because if you were to understand the ARPUs that exist in developed countries, it's ridiculous, and yet you have carriers losing money. So it's something to really take pride in. But the number I want to focus you on the most is the one at the bottom, and this comes from a conversation last week with the CEO of AdMob India. The number of mobile video ads delivered in this country last month, 0. 0. So that's an important number, and I'll explain why a little bit later. But advertising, it's occurring to me more and more. I've been living here now 2 months since I moved from Canada to India, and I have to admit, being here gives you a different view on the market, a different view of what people will and won't stand for or consume, and price point's critical. And really, I think when you think about how we're going to grow consumption of rich media content on mobile devices, we have to focus on price point. And we have to take away those barriers. And we can't just look at this as a top market, mid-market, or bottom market solution. And the beauty of advertising is it democratizes access to content. And I really think that advertising is going to be what grows the pie for everybody, for the content owners, for the telecom operators, for the enablers in between. I think it's advertising. So what's so brilliant about what we do? Streaming is streaming, right? In actuality, it's not. Streaming was largely, when people talk about streaming, typically, they're talking about what's known as RTSP, which is a protocol. It's kind of like HTTP, but it's different in that it's actually a stateful protocol. It relies on a permanent session full connection between a device and a server. So if you look at that red bar, that's essentially an RTSP stream. Now these you'll see this is actually data rates at the side, going from 0 to 200 kilobits per second. These are actual data rates that we would experience in our testing. So you'll see in our client when I do the demo, which will hopefully work. I cross my fingers. You never know demos. I mean, even Steve Jobs had problems. But you know, these are actually the data rates that a user would experience in the market. And RTSP really delivers a solid chunk, a solid, steady stream of video. It doesn't really adjust it, right? It requires the ability to keep that stream going at a static level. And the problem is wireless, especially low bandwidth wireless, is not static, right? It's a dynamic thing. It changes like the wind. It's and so if you're trying to push something through, you know, a dynamic data rate that relies on a static data rate, it's not going to work, right? And this is why streaming is largely what it is. In this case, you know, as you see in an edge coverage, you might be able to get the stream to work for a bit, then it will stop. It might keep the session, in which case it will continue again for another few seconds or a minute. It will stop. But then if you reach a dead zone, that RTSP stream is gone completely because it loses the session. The server loses touch with the device, right? So what happens at that point is if you are able to reconnect, you have to start that stream from the beginning. Okay, what we do that's different is, so we are essentially an adaptive and resilient platform. Those are two different concepts. On the adaptive side, that means that we essentially, we adjust basically the quality level of the stream in real time with the way that the client, so we rely on a thin client that sits on the device. The way that client reads the network, it tells our server what it's actually receiving, and we then adjust the chunk that is going to the client. And we do this in real time. And I'll show you how that works. Now, the other side of what we do is we deliver video in chunks. So it's actually chunks of about 40 seconds to a minute long. Okay, and each of those chunks is coming in at a different quality level depending on the available network data rate, right? Now, let's say you get to a dead zone. You get to a dead zone, you lose the connection, right? So what happens is we actually keep the session active. And because we've got some intelligence on the client side, when you resume that connection, let's say your battery comes back, let's say you get back into a full live network, let's say, you know, who knows, you turn on your phone because you're on your way back from wherever you were going, we can now allow you to resume the stream from where you left off. So it's a simple thing, resume stream, but when you're watching and, you know, whether it's 5 minutes, 20 minutes, or an hour-long video, and I think there are people in this country that will do that. That's actually an important thing. You don't want to have to. How do you go back in a conventional streaming system to that?